Yeah, welcome in. Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast live. Yes. And here we go. So as you can see, looks like I'm by myself right now. Might be by myself for the whole show. G's not gonna be here with us, but might have some other guests popping up. Might have my guy Transform show up. So we are gonna go ahead and we're gonna do this thing, man. I got some pretty interesting topics I think to talk to you guys about tonight. And like I said, it may just be me, and that's cool because every now and then I just come on here and kick it by myself, and that's all good. So as you can see, we're definitely going to be talking about some early college football ranks. I'm not going to get too much into that, and the reason why is if you were with me last college football season on this show, I had my main man Ryan Langford, former University of Illinois Fighting Illini wide receiver, former Indianapolis Colt, and former Canadian Football League wide receiver, joined me as the Format Podcast official college football analyst. And he's going to be starting back in that position again this season. So we're going to have some fun with that and can't wait for him to come on. But I'm just going to kind of touch on that stuff a little bit this episode here. Then we're going to talk about Kendrick Perkins, who I thought had seen the light, but maybe not. Then we're going to touch on what we talk new super team, which I can't believe this was even said, but we're going to get into it. And finally, Caitlin Clark, back from the Olympic break, had a really good game last night. So we're definitely going to get on that. It's not that serious. What's good, my man? Steve Splendor, what's going on? So, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna touch on these topics. We're gonna talk about them, and we're gonna do what we do here on the Format Podcast, and that's get into some good sports talk. But before we do all that, you know what time it is. If you're here on YouTube and you haven't already, please make sure you go ahead, click that like, that subscribe, that notification bell. Make sure you're kept up to date whenever we drop new content on the channel. If you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast, and we should come right up. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you give us that like, that 5-star review, and drop a comment. All that stuff helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. And finally, make sure you write it down, put it in your phone, set an alarm, do whatever you got to do to remember. Saturday nights at 7 p.m. we are live here on the Format Podcast, and we'll give you the opportunity to call in, talk to us, get at me. I love it. I can. First and foremost, though, if you're in the chat, I appreciate you, whether you're watching on Facebook, whether you're watching on YouTube. Please go ahead, go over to the YouTube page. The YouTube page, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Really helps. What's up, Nick? What's going on, man? It really helps. The more likes we have, it helps the channel get out to more people, because that's a big part of that YouTube algorithm. So let's do that. All right. So let's get to it. Like I said, I'm not going to go too in depth on this particular topic because my guy Ryan Langford, the Format Podcast official college football analyst, he's going to be back with us this season. And we're going to really delve much more deeply into the college football. But for now, it's something I definitely wanted to touch on. I'm a big college football fan, in case you didn't know, and I'll tell you, that's one of the longest off seasons, man. Now it's going to be a little shorter going forward, because now, what is it, to win the championship? You have to play 17 games. So you got you have a 17 game season now. So between the regular season and the new 12-team college football playoff, the season's going to last a little bit longer, but still you have from mid-January all the way up till September. That's an incredibly long off season. And that's tough if you love college football, because I do. And I'm one of those people. It's really hard in the summertime when there's no NFL, there's no college football. In most years, all you have is baseball. Or, if you're into some of the other stuff, maybe you watch soccer in the foreign leagues or whatever, English Premier League or La Liga or something like that. And if you can get access to that, that's cool as well. But the point is, for me personally, it is hard. I'm not a baseball guy, so oh, here we go. Yup. There we go. Transformer. What up, bro? Yeah, I know the Knowles. I know. But like I keep telling you, we're gonna see you come November in that night game when y'all gotta come up there and freeze in South Bend. But that's a different story. We'll talk about that another time. But yeah, so college football season is just about here. All these teams are in the heat, literally, of training camp, and they're getting ready to go. What do we have here? About 2.5 weeks now until the season starts. So I can't wait. It's not that serious. College football is awesome. I actually like it better than the pros. I'm always back and forth on that, right? I'm normally thinking that during the college football season that is better than the pros, but then once the college football season's over, and then you get the pros and the playoffs is ramping up, and then that I'm like, nah, maybe I was wrong, but I'm always back and forth. I love them both, man. What? You sound silly, Transformer. You sound silly, but that's okay. You're going to be going up against one of the best defenses in the country, one of the best secondaries in the country, and you got DJU for your quarterback. So you know you better go look what happened last time DJU went to Notre Dame Stadium. But that's a different thing. Michigan, Big Ten, go blue. Okay, all right. Uh, Steve's playing. Steve, man, 69 nothing. Simon Nopes. I like that. I like that. All right. I see y'all already at it in the chat. That's what I'm talking about, man. Interaction. And again, make sure if you haven't already, please go ahead, hit that like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. All right. So this is the thing. So what earlier this week we saw the preseason polls come out with our preseason rankings, and kind of seeing where the quote unquote experts see all these teams landing to start the season, who's the best, and kind of what they see for their top 25, which gives you that starting point in terms of where your rankings are and how hard it may or may not be, how difficult it may or may not be for you as a team to be able to make it to the 12-team college football playoff. Now, it's going to be a lot easier to make it to the 12-team theoretically than it would have been to make it to the old 14 college football playoff. Why? Because there's simply more spots available, right? And I think that's a good thing, because I'm one of those people that, like, I didn't like that 14 college football playoff, nor the old BCS system where you just get the final two, because to me it almost says like it says to a team it really doesn't matter how good you are, how hard you play, because you probably won't get a shot at playing for the chip anyway. At least the 12-team playoff gives you more of a shot. Now the 12-team playoff still has its college football BS involved. Why? Because the SEC is and the Big Ten are both negotiating like, hey, we want a certain number of spots. And for the most part, that's how it's going to go, right? These are the powers, these are the major conferences in college football, and that's how it's going to end up. You hear some of the so-called experts, your Colin Cowherds and your Paul Feinbaums, et cetera, saying like certain teams don't ever deserve to be in the playoff, right? Like we saw Florida State get smoked by Georgia in the bowl game last year. I can't remember what bowl it was. I don't know if it was the Orange Bowl or the Peach Bowl, but anyway, Georgia smoked them. But the point is, a guy like Paul Feinbaum on ESPN, their college football expert, he's going in, he's saying that, well, based on the result of that game against Georgia, Florida State didn't deserve to be there, which is total BS, because Florida State is the first undefeated conference champion in the history of college football not to make the 14 playoff. Like, that's just absurd, right? Whether or not they would have got smoked if they got in is not the point. The point is they earned their way there to get smoked, right? TCU got smoked by Georgia, 2 years ago? I think 65-7 in the championship game. And it's this whole, oh, they didn't deserve to be there, they don't recruit well enough, they're not good enough. No, guess what? They won their conference, and then they went and they won their conference title. They did everything they had to do to get there. We can't look back in hindsight and say that because somebody got smoked, they didn't deserve to be playing for that championship. That is total BS. What do we have? It's not that serious. I've never liked Notre Dame, but I like their coach. It's like my feelings about Coach K. I hate Duke, but I love Coach K. All right, that's fair. You're giving some respect. It's not that serious. I'm gonna let you live on that. But yeah, this whole business of we're looking at it from the backside, and saying that, looking at the results of the tournament and how it happened, and saying, well, that team didn't deserve to be there. That's total BS. For instance, right? And I actually did a show on this maybe a couple of years ago, right after the TCU got annihilated by Georgia in the national championship game, because Colin Cowherd, guy I listened to a whole lot, he said that basically they didn't deserve to be there. And we heard a whole bunch of other players saying, a whole bunch of other so-called experts saying that TCU didn't deserve to be there. And I'm like, this is total garbage, right? And what I did was I went back and I looked at the Super Bowls in the NFL, right? And the Super Bowl is obviously the best of the best, the NFL, the best football league there is. So the best of the best are there, right? And like almost half of all the Super Bowls ever played were blowouts. And I went one by one, and I went down and I called out the scores on that show. And I'm like, Do we ever hear someone saying that that team didn't deserve to be there? No. They played their way there. They got there. The result is the result. If they weren't good enough, or they were on that particular day, or they weren't good enough, period, then so be it. But we never hear, oh, this team didn't deserve to be here. So we got to stop this elitist snob mentality when it comes to college football and saying that, well, because the team got smoked, they didn't deserve to be there. And I'm going to bring this up because Steve, you know where I'm going with this. I'm a Notre Dame guy, through and through, diehard Notre Dame football fan. 2012, Notre Dame had the number one scoring defense in the country, did everything they had to do, fought their way to an undefeated 12-0 season, plays Alabama in the national championship game, and just gets smoked, 42-14. Right? They weren't good enough, clearly. Right? They couldn't stand up to Alabama. That team was just, miles ahead of where Notre Dame was, and that's fine. But guess what? You can't go back as a result and look at the result of the game and say Notre Dame didn't deserve to be there. Did everything that they did, during the course of the regular season not matter? Was it irrelevant? They didn't have a right to play for the championship that they earned a shot at. We got to stop this. It's absolutely ridiculous, man. The college football elitist mentality is freaking terrible. Steve says, if Florida State didn't, I think he means to say lose their QB to injury, I think they get in last year's Final Four. They absolutely would have. Can't remember the kid's name. Jordan Travis. That was the quarterback. They absolutely would have gotten in. But again, that's not the point, Steve. Part of football is it's a physical game. Guys get hurt. It's next man up. We cannot use that as an excuse not to put in the team that we don't want to put in and say, well, they didn't deserve it. Where I was going with all this, in terms of the rankings to start the season, what I was thinking about was the 2017 UCF team, right? They went 12-0, 13-0. They beat a Georgia team. They beat an Auburn team in the Peach Bowl that beat Georgia and Alabama in back-to-back weeks, and I believe won the SEC championship, right? But they weren't good enough to be able to get into the 14 playoff. But UCF ended up playing them, and UCF beat them in the Peach Bowl. But the problem was, and I truly believe that UCF team that year could have beaten every team in the country except Alabama, right? But at the end of the day, they never even got a chance to prove it, because why? In the preseason ranking, they started too low to get high up enough to make the top four. And that's just BS, because they went out and they did their work and they never even got the chance. And I can't, that's one thing I'm never going to be able to accept about college football, as much as I loved college football. So with all that said, that's what kind of gets me into moving into just taking a quick look at the preseason top 25 rankings, right? Again, I'm not going to break this down too much, because Ryan Langford and I are going to really get into that. But I thought it was an interesting point. Forgive the long soliloquy getting into it. I really love college football. And if you watch this show, I'm big on like competition, right? I think you guys can understand that by now. I truly am big on competition, because what's the point of sports if not for competition? I get it. There's a whole lot more money now than there ever has been before. But at the end of the day, sports are built foundationally on competition. And so I get the money part, but removing the competition aspect, then is it really still sports? And that's terrible. Steve says, I agree. I just never saw a team penalized because of an injury, which was definitely the case for FSU last year, but their results should have trumped that. And that's what I'm saying, because that's what Robert Griffin III actually tweeted out earlier in the week, prior to being fired from ESPN, is that even with a second string who got injured, and then a third string quarterback playing, they being Florida State, managed to go undefeated throughout that regular season and then win their conference championship. But then they got jerked. Why? Because people are looking at it and say, well, four best teams, they're no longer one of the four best teams. And they're looking at, the best TV product. No, that's not what it's about. Like, okay, I do get that the TV product matters. Why? Because advertising dollars, they want those eyeballs on them, right? But at the end of you're telling all these kids, like, yo, your undefeated season, everything you played for, the way you fought, scrapped, and clawed to finish that season undefeated and win your conference didn't matter. And that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. Like, who would have been mad to see that Michigan-Florida State matchup? I still believe Michigan would have beaten them, but I think that would have been a really good game. I really do. Again, matchups are everything, man. But, at the end of the day, I think what they did there, because the college football world, especially the college football playoff, ESPN, SEC connection, I think they couldn't stomach not having Georgia there, but having Florida State there when Florida State was an injured version of itself. And like that's just not the way that you go about athletics. But anyway, yeah, I'm still on my soapbox about this, but let's go ahead and let's look at the schedule a little bit and see what we have to talk about before we open up the phone lines and discuss a little college football. We know that whatever the committee says is bull hockey. It will always come down to money and ratings. Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. And I do understand that money is super important. I understand that ratings are super important, but at the same time, like you can't be you can't be putting these athletes in a situation where you're literally telling them that the on-field product and what you do doesn't matter. You just can't. But I say you can't, but clearly you can, right? Because that's exactly what they did last season. All right, let's go ahead and look at this for the millionth time. I've been trying to get to it and I keep talking, but let's look at this these rankings. All right, so we got the AP top 25 preseason and the coaches poll. So of course, Georgia is number one. I'm not really sure why, other than the SEC bias. They're in the SEC, so they're going to get the nod. But personally, I think Ohio State should have been the number one team in this preseason ranking based on what they've been able to do during this offseason and in the transfer portal, shoring up the quarterback position, shoring up the running back position. And obviously, you know, they're going to be loaded on defense. They have an outstanding play caller and offensive play designer in Chip Kelly, who came over from being the head coach at UCLA. Now he's Ryan Day's OC. They're going to get back a little bit back to more of their physical DNA on the ground, because we know that Chip Kelly loves to run the football. Because even if you remember back at Oregon, when they were blowing people out, they were doing it in a physical way, and they were running the football. And so, you know, there was a whole lot of that going on. And now I think that they are really going to get back to that. You know, you have Travion Henderson, you have Quinshawn Judkins, I think that came the Ole Miss transfer. And these are two of the best running backs in the country. You have them. You always have a strong O-line at Ohio State. And now you have another guy you can build into the quarterback, into the run game with quarterback Will Howard. I think he came from Kansas State, I believe. He can throw it. He can run it. I mean, you've got some. And of course, you're always going to have high-level elite receivers, right? Julian, well, I think Julian Fleming is gone. I think he transferred, but Emeka Egbuka came back. He's one of the best receivers in the country. You're always going to have high level wide receiver play at Ohio State. So this, I think, is a very, very good football team. And personally, I would have put them number one. Now, maybe some people are going to say, you know, I have an anti-SEC bias. Okay, I'll take that. But I just think that based on what they did this offseason, that Ohio State is the best in the country. Now, I think if you're going to put Georgia ahead of them, your only argument would be that Georgia has Carson Beck coming back. He's a Heisman candidate. And as much as Will Howard is going to be good for that system, he's probably not quite on that level. All right. So number three, and I'm not going to go through all these. I'll kind of stop where I see fit. But number three is Oregon. Dan Lanning has really built an SEC style power, and he has done that. He's done that out west in Oregon. And Phil Knight has basically said that they will pay whatever to build this program to try and win a championship. So obviously we know that NIL and pay for play are all legal now. So Phil Knight is really trying to make it happen. I think he's in his 80s. He's Oregon alum. He wants to win before he dies. And so he's willing to pay whatever money to make that happen. And they've got a new quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, really outstanding guy. Started off at UCF, did his thing, moved on to Oklahoma, did his thing again. He's one of the most experienced and accurate quarterbacks in the country. Really, really good college quarterback. I don't anticipate he'll be some superstar on the next level. Doesn't have a huge arm, but can throw it. He is moderately mobile. And you know that Dan Lanning, he's going to want to run the football SEC style. He's got relatively big guys in the trenches for a Western team, and they're coming into the Big Ten. And I definitely think that they are, I think they're in good shape to be very, very competitive. And I'm not upset at all with them at number three. Might be a little high for my taste, but I'm not upset at anyone who puts them there. Texas made the 14 college football playoff last year, lost the shootout to Washington. And I think probably the main difference there was Washington had slightly better receiver core and a better quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. And then You saw was it Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, and of course Roman Dunze, who made a spectacular grab with Caleb Williams today in the Bears preseason game. So Texas, very good team. That's another team that's changing conferences with realignment. They are in their first year in the SEC, and Steve Sarkisian, their head coach, has done a really good job when he took that Texas job, knowing that they were going to be moving into the SEC in a few years in terms of building them up physically for that conference. We saw them go into Tuscaloosa last year and win and really kind of physically manhandle Alabama. They were able to run the football. They were able to throw the football. They were able to protect against the pass rush. So Quinn Ewers played really well. And of course, we know that should anything happen to Quinn Ewers, you have Arch Manning, who lit up the spring game. You have him waiting in the wings. So they are very good offensively. They're very good in the trenches. They're going to be able to run the football, and we're going to see what they can do in their first season in what is it in the SEC. Alabama, another really good team. Now the problem there is obviously Nick Saban, who most regard as the greatest college football coach of all time. He's gone, but he's replaced by an outstanding coach in Kalen DeBoer, who came down from Washington. Obviously, he took Washington to the national championship game last year where they fell to Michigan. But really good coach. I think he's like 104-12 in his career as a head coach, going from D3 all the way up to Division I. And now he is the guy that succeeds the legend, right? Um, I would never want to be the guy who succeeds the legend. What do they say? You don't want to be the guy who follows the guy. You want to be the guy who follows the guy who follows the guy, right? You want to be that guy. So, but then, if you're Kalen DeBoer and you get an opportunity to coach Alabama, that's one of those blue blood programs. You can't really turn that down. So, um, I don't know if I have him ranked that high. Kalen DeBoer is supposed to be a quarterback guru. We're going to see what he's able to do in terms of developing Jalen Milroe. Now, he doesn't have his guy, Ryan Grubb, who was coming with him and has been everywhere with him and had came down to Alabama, but the Seattle Seahawks actually snatched him up, and now he's their OC. So yeah, Alabama is going to be an interesting watch. We'll see what happens. And so much of this thing that's crazy is guys really moving around in the transfer portal. So, we'll see what that is. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin is getting a lot of love. We're going to see what they are. I haven't really taken the time to kind of look at their roster and look at their schedule, but they're getting a lot of love. One, because they're in the SEC. Two, Lane Kiffin is a really great offensive coach, and he's built up a pretty solid program. So we'll see what they do. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, again, a little bias here. You guys know that's the team that I love when it comes to college football. That's the team that I root for. They have a very manageable schedule. 3 toughest games, obviously the opener at A&M. As I said with the Transformer earlier, they've got a November home game, which makes it really manageable, a home night game against Florida State. I don't know how Florida State is. I mean, it's not everything, but being a Southern team going up north, playing relative cold to them at a night game in mid-November, I think that's gonna be difficult. And Notre Dame is purported to have one of the best returning defenses in the country, really good along the defensive line as well. They have an outstanding secondary with unanimous All-American safety Xavier Watts, who came back. Now, Xavier Watts is not Kyle Hamilton, okay, but he is a ball hawk, led the nation with 7 interceptions last year. Benjamin Morrison is getting healthy, former All-American cornerback. As a true freshman, he led the nation with 7 interceptions and I believe 3 pick sixes. So Notre Dame looks really good. Let's see. It's not that serious. Without bias, how do you think Notre Dame will finish this year? I believe Notre Dame can finish 11-1. Their schedule is really manageable, but the biggest thing, it's really gonna come down to specifically, I truly believe, if they can pull off the win in the opener at Texas A&M, right? Because if they lose that game, and we've seen them lose a lot of big games, right? That's not being biased. If they lose that game, there's really no more margin of error. And can you get through the rest of the schedule, which it's not a murderer's row, but can you get through the rest of the schedule undefeated? I don't know if they can do that. Steve, you're absolutely right. It's going to come down to the offensive line. Starting left tackle, I think his name's Jagasaw. Can't remember if I think he ripped his bicep. He's going to be out for the year. So that's a tough blow, but Notre Dame has generally been very good in terms of offensive line development, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, Notre Dame, I like Steve in the chat saying that they could go 10-2 on the year. That sounds pretty reasonable. But if they start off the season well, 11-1 is really, really possible because their three biggest games again are what is it? The opener at A&M uh, in November. Florida State comes to Notre Dame and then finish out the season at USC. So it's going to depend on, again, also on how good USC is this year. But we'll see. We'll see. So yeah, 10-2, but okay, he tore his pec. All right. I thought it was a bicep, but yeah, he tore his pec. And yeah, I'm aware that it was season ending. So yeah, tough to lose your starting left tackle before the season even starts to a torn pectoral. So that's tough. Okay, where were we? Penn State. Penn State is iffy for me. They I think they lucked out a bit in the scheduling this year. Their scheduling is always tough because, well, it used to be tough because when you had the Big Ten in the East and the West, they always had to play Ohio State and Michigan every year. So they could pretty much count on being third in the division every year. And that's going to keep you out of the playoffs, even if you are a team good enough to get to the Rose Bowl, right? So that's tough. But I think they avoid a lot of that this season. But still, Penn State is a team a lot like Notre Dame, generally has a lot of talent, but somehow loses the big games constantly. They just can't win those big games. So yeah, Penn State at number 8, I bit high for me. This here is the most interesting one. Michigan, the defending national champions, at number 9. I think that's fair, and I think that's giving them due respect. I think the problem is they lost so much talent to the NFL, and of course, they lost head coach Jim Harbaugh. Now, Sharon Moore has shown that he's able to step in admirably when Harbaugh wasn't there, but that's not for an entire season. That's knowing that, okay, win this game, win the next game, and our coach is going to be back, right? So there's that. But I think the fact is, now we find out for sure if Sharon Moore can really guide his program through the entire season. That's the one. And of course, we see Ohio State is loaded up for bear because Michigan has beat Ohio State 3 years in a row, and Ohio State is coming for them. So can Michigan survive having lost so much talent to the NBA? Would they get 13 or 14 and NFL, excuse me? I believe they got 13 or 14 guys drafted this past season. Somebody in the chat, check that out for me. See how many players Michigan got drafted in the 2024 NFL draft. It's 13 or 14, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, that's still a lot of elite talent to send to the next level. So, um, I don't I don't think Michigan is gonna stink, Steve. I think that they're going to take a step back. I think they have to. They lose one of the best coaches in the country, and of course, like I said, they lost a lot of talent. So yeah, chat, somebody check that out for me and see how many guys Michigan got drafted this past season. Okay, Florida State. We talked about Florida State. That's fair at number 1. I just don't trust DJ Uiagalelei. I just don't. As you mentioned, we've seen him at Clemson. We've seen him at Oregon State. He's never going to get any more accurate, and he's never going to stop throwing picks. So it's like, what do you do there? What do you do there? Now, Florida State is a team that's always going to have plenty of talent, but what do you do if you can't get the quarterback right? You had it right, but obviously that guy, he's moved on. So it is what it is. Let's see. There you go, Transformer. Thank you. Michigan got 13 guys drafted last year. That's tough, man. It's tough to recover from that unless you're like Alabama or Georgia, right? Because you have that many high level guys waiting in the wings, just ready to take off for their opportunity. And I don't think that, as well as Michigan developed, I don't think that they have that many high level guys waiting in the wings. And I don't even think we know for sure who their quarterback is going to be. I think that Alex Orji has all the physical tools, but I don't even know if he is the guy that's gotten the job yet so far. So, not gonna run down this whole thing. Gonna talk just about a couple of teams I'm interested in seeing. There's a lot of hype around Missouri. I don't know if that's just because they're in the SEC or if they've developed really well. I think they have the guy who's regarded as the best receiver in the country. I think Luther Burden the third. So we'll see what he does. Tennessee, I think I'm very interested to see what happens with them. Their new quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, really interested to see. Extremely highly recruited. Josh Heupel is a very good offensive coach, as we've seen since his days at UCF. Tennessee is going to be dangerous. They can run it. That's a good football team. Oklahoma, I've always liked Brent Venables. I think that Brent Venables is the real reason that Clemson was as dominant as it was. They recruited extremely well along the defensive line, and Brent Venables, he coached that defense up, man. And so I don't know if the team is physically built, Oklahoma, well enough to really compete and be dominant. And well, not dominant, but really be one of the higher level teams in the SEC. We'll have to find out. But they're really high on their new quarterback, Jackson Arnold. So I don't know. We'll see. Oklahoma is a team that always recruits well, but now they've got to recruit against the rest of the SEC. So this is going to be very interesting. Steve, you're right. Mizzou was tough last year, and they bring some key guys back. But I just don't know. I just don't know. We know that they get an automatic boost just by virtue of being in the SEC from the college football media. But we're going to see how good they really are. Oklahoma State, for me, got to see, but I really like Ollie Gordon. I really like him. You guys, if you watch the show, you know I love the running back position, and seeing a dynamic running back like that, widely regarded as the best running back in the country. I think he had like 1,700 plus rushing yards last year. Really, really good running back. He's back, so we'll see what they have around them. Kansas State, uh, really good team as well. 2 years ago they won the Big 12, so they won the Big 12 championship. They beat TCU in a classic in that game. The U, Miami, very interesting. They got Damian Martinez from Oregon State, the running back out of the transfer portal, one of the better running backs in the country. And they also got Cam Ward, the quarterback from Washington State. So really good. So the thing with me is Mario Cristobal, head coach at the U, and obviously he played there as a player, O lineman, really good recruiter, but he doesn't seem to be a good coach, right? His in-game, his X's and O's and in-game adjustments and stuff like that, really don't believe in him very much. So we're going to see at some point there's got to be a meshing of the recruiting and the in-game coaching. So we're going to see what that is. Texas A&M, we talked briefly about them. Obviously, they host Notre Dame in the opener, and again, they're in the SEC, so they got to deal with that schedule. But a lot of talent still on that team from what Jimbo Fisher was able to bring in. And now they've got a disciplined, dedicated head coach in Mike Elko, really strong defensive guy. We're going to see what they do. Arizona, don't know too much about them. Kansas, no. USC, Lincoln Riley, Miller Moss, I think threw 6 touchdowns in the bowl game last year. So that's a guy that is not going to be looking to break structure nearly as much as Caleb Williams was. Not saying, yes, Steve, Cam Ward did go to Miami. I thought I mentioned that. But anyway, yeah, Miller Moss is not going to be looking to break structure nearly as much as Caleb Williams was. One, because he physically doesn't have the tools to do it, but that's just not his style of play. So Lincoln Riley can kind of stay more towards running his scheme. So there's that. Deion Branch is one of the, is it Deion Branch? I think Zachariah Branch. I'm sorry, not Deion Branch. Deion Branch played for the Patriots, but Zachariah Branch, one of the most exciting weapons in the country in the kick return game, in the wide receiver game. Really outstanding young player, and we're going to see immediately what USC is about, because they have LSU in the opener, and it really sucks because we find out that Lincoln Riley has been trying for 2 years to get out of this game, because he and Brian Kelly, I believe, had the same agent. And so he's been trying to work the back channels to get USC out of this game. And Brian Kelly was like, oh, no, I'm not letting you out of it. NC State, don't know much about them. Iowa, that's a team that's so interesting, because year in, year out, they're able to run the football. They have outstanding O linemen. They have really good tight ends, and they have really, really good defenses, but their offense is always trash. And it was bad to the point that Kirk Ferentz, he had to fire his own son, who was OC last year, Brian Ferentz. And so now they're going to come with a new OC, new scheme, and quite possibly a better offense. So we'll see how good Iowa can be with a better offense. The problem is, if they've improved, so has the rest of the conference, right? Obviously, adding Washington, adding USC, adding UCLA, adding Oregon, and then taking out the divisions. So yeah, tough lineup. But if you love college football, man, all this is really, really exciting, and you're looking forward to seeing how all this stuff plays out. I know I am. All right, so I'm gonna leave it right there on this particular topic. And I am going to open up the phone lines, right? Because that's what we like to do here on the Format Podcast. Let's see. Oh man, I haven't even had the phone number scrolling. So let me go ahead and put that on. All right. So if you want to call in and give me your thoughts on the college football season and kind of some of the stuff I talked about, whether or not you agree with that whole business of how teams are getting chosen, and what are your thoughts about a team can be undefeated and get left out of the playoff and all that. And then, of course, the preseason rankings. The number is 904. Dang, I thought I turned it back on. All right. So the number is 904-219-8264. 904-219-8264. Waiting for your calls. Let's get it. So in the meantime, it's not that serious. Wow. I think Caleb Williams is grossly overrated. I hope that I'm wrong. Okay, so I'm not a Caleb Williams fan, not at all. But he has some ability to make some plays and make some throws that you just don't see everyone being able to make. Let me go ahead and take this call. Format Podcast. Who's this?
It's Steve. Bruce, what's happening, brother?
Steve, what's going on, man? Good to
Not
talk
much,
to you.
man. Enjoying my evening watching you. I had to call in.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that, man. What you got?
The thing I was thinking of, I'm looking at the top 25 since you brought it up. And the two things I kind of that stick out to me, in my opinion. I think you did a good preview of everything, breaking it down. Penn State has no business being in the top 10, just like every year. They're preseason top 10 for no reason.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a given every year. Ever since they've had Saquon, I think if you go back, they're preseason ranked top 10 every year because Saquon went there in like 2017. It's ridiculous.
I think it's based on the recruiting, because they have a lot of talent on the team. Typically, they just don't play up to it. But go ahead.
They do. I can't disagree. Like, if you're looking at the numbers, but you made a good comparison, and I do it all the time. You compared them to Notre Dame, and you're right. And I hate to admit it, but it's the truth. Where it's like, if you look at the numbers, like with recruiting, they technically bring in talent, but I don't know if it's a player development thing. It just never translates to the big game. When Penn State has their chance against Michigan and Ohio State, they fold.
Yes.
And I hate to say it, but brother, we're in that same game.
Yeah.
We just can't get across the finish line in those big games.
Yeah,
but,
I don't think that James Franklin.
Go
I'm sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I want to hear you.
No, I was saying I don't feel like James Franklin is a big game coach. I really don't. And I think that's the biggest problem.
I totally agree. And it's a shame because it seems like he brought Penn State. He's a lot like Brian Kelly.
Correct.
Brian Kelly brought us to a 10-win relevance after some really rough years. Franklin, after that dark time at Penn State with all the drama, I think it was Bill O'Brien right after Joe Paul, then Bill O'Brien. I mean, that was some dark times for Penn State fans. And he brought them to a 10-win relevance.
Right.
But what has it really, you know what I mean? What have you really won? And we're both in that. It's like we're like twins in that respect. Where
it's tough.
We're like that 10-win plateau where it's like we kind of matter because of our name and brand, but it just never really pans out to be in that top 5 threshold where you're actually competing for something.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tough, man, because like I said, I don't believe James Franklin is a big game coach. He doesn't seem to adjust well, but with the divisions going away in the Big Ten, although the Big Ten has gotten more difficult, Penn State has a better opportunity now because they know that there's going to be some years where they don't have to play Ohio State or Michigan or Ohio State and Michigan. And in a year where everything falls right, if they have if they had a good recruiting year that year, then they really have the opportunity to do something special. And I think I heard that in like 7 out of the last 10 years, I heard James Franklin on an interview during this offseason, 7 out of the last 10 years or something like that. Had this been a 12-team playoff, Penn State would have been in, right? So that 14 playoff is a very tough thing. So at the end of the day, and I think we know this in like just about every sport, you just want to get a chance to get in the dance, right? Once you get in, anything can happen. And so I think, you got a team like Notre Dame looking at that. You got a team like Penn State looking at that. And I'm sure lots of other teams, like, we just got to get in. We got to get in and we can get hot. Now, trying to win 4 straight in a sport that can have significant talent disparity, like college football, that's a lot tougher. But you know, now with NIL and you can literally pay for play, I guess at this point, a team has to do what they have to do to make sure they can field the most competitive possible roster.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Just get me a ticket. Let me in the dance.
That's it.
Let's see where we can go.
Totally Absolutely. Agree. Yeah, man.
I don't want to take up all your time, brother. I had one more point I wanted to make, and I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Of course.
Why would you give Ohio State the edge over Georgia? I'm just curious.
I just think that based on what they built out in the offseason in the transfer portal, and I think they have better coaching. At least better offensive coaching, right? Georgia obviously is physically dominant. They might have better defensive coaching, but Ohio State, I think, is just so loaded everywhere. And again, I think the biggest reason for that, obviously, it didn't just hurt them to lose 3 straight years to Michigan. It hurt them to lose to Michigan and watch Michigan go on to win the national championship. And the past 2 years losing to Michigan based on the time in the season when they play, that recency bias, it's also kept them out of the championship game, out of the championship game, out of the 14 playoff, right? But now they're like, we're not going to allow this to happen again. They're like, Harbaugh's gone. So Ohio State has upped the ante on their roster. They've upped the ante on their coaching staff. And I think that they have such a sense of urgency about them. I just think that they're the best team in the country right now. Could be wrong, because I think early in the year they have to go to Oregon, which is going to be a hell of a game. I'm looking forward to that.
But you know what? You know what, though? We were talking, you mentioned it earlier. They lose that game at Oregon in a competitive fashion. That doesn't hurt them.
It doesn't. And that's the beauty of the 12-team playoff, right? Because, exactly. You can still bounce back and have a really great rest of your season, and it's not going to kill you. Also, on the flip side of Ohio State, I didn't mention this when I was running through. Texas goes to Michigan, I think, in week 2. That's gonna be another amazing game.
Oh man, I'm telling you, the first 3-4 weeks of football, we have some bangers.
Fantastic.
Bro. We don't have to wait through the MAC and the WAC.
Right.
Like we're seeing some bangers. This is what, and to be honest, this is how it should be.
Yes.
With this new format. Before, I understand running the table, the undefeated. That was like the metric. That was the bar. You lose one game, now it becomes politics and who's, what do they say? When you win in a fancy fashion, if you score 100 points.
Margin of victory or whatever you call that.
Right.
Yeah,
it comes down to all these subjective metrics where it's like, if you know you're undefeated, you're good. So you might not take those risks early on. But, I mean, obviously, we're biased, but we got Notre Dame, Texas A&M week. We got Texas and Michigan week 2.
You got
Oregon,
week 1,
Ohio
LSU
State.
and USC, like a lot of really good games. Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, man, I'm sorry. I hate to take up your time.
No. You're good, man.
How do you feel about that game? How do you feel about LSU and USC?
So this is funny. When John Kennedy, for those of you who don't know, John Kennedy is the host of the Always Irish Notre Dame football podcast. Really good show if you love Notre Dame football, and also a good show if you love college football. So there's your plug, John. Maybe a month and a half ago, John was on my show, and we actually talked about that. And I'm going to tell you, I am rooting for USC to beat LSU in that game. One, because I will never, ever, 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 ever root for an SEC team. Never. I won't do it. That's number one. And number two, the better USC is, the better it is for Notre Dame at the end of the season when they go out to LA. And so, I'm looking for that.
Absolutely. I actually agree. I'm going to be rooting for USC. And I know as Notre Dame fans, people are probably like crossing their eyes.
What is wrong with you?
What's going on? But I agree. I want the Notre Dame USC game to matter. I always do. I hope they're undefeated.
That's right. Can you imagine going out there to finish the season with Notre Dame and USC undefeated? That'd be fantastic. And realistically, whoever loses that game, they're probably still in. Yep, that's true. Nah, Notre Dame is not trying to go to the SEC. It's just not a cultural fit. That's not going to happen. And I don't know that the SEC has too much interest in Notre Dame anyway. The better fit, and it's eventually going to happen, is the Big Ten.
I think geographically, if SEC is going to try to expand, I think they're going to look at Clemson, Florida State.
Absolutely. That's what fits. Yes.
It absolutely does. And obviously, if the Big Ten could snag Notre Dame, they would.
Yes.
I have some thoughts on that. we're seeing less conferences because, Bruce, I know you've heard it. I've heard it. When is Notre Dame going to have to join a conference? And I've always said,
when it becomes a financial issue or an access to the playoff issue, it's those two things.
Yep. And frankly, with the NBC contract and that money keep pumping,
that's right.
There's no way that they're going to be able to force Notre Dame because with that NBC money, teams are still going to schedule them.
Correct. That's right.
Teams are going to want to play Notre Dame. The NBC money. I understand the Big Ten has now a contract with them, but if Notre Dame has their own broadcast, their own contract, it just doesn't make sense. And we're seeing less conferences. It was always you have to have that conference championship.
Yeah.
Well, now we're seeing conferences diminish. And to be honest with you, I would not be surprised if we saw the ACC dissolve here in the next 3 to 5 years, potentially, depending on how things shake out. You know, and it depending on. Again, I know this sounds like an old man take, an old traditional take, but how is the Big 12 going to survive? How long is it going to last without the brands of Texas and Oklahoma? I'm sorry, that's a factor in my opinion.
You're right, but I think what's going to happen, the key with the Big 12 is can Colorado be a good team and pump some life in there? And can Utah, which is a very good team and has one of the best coaches in the country, can they bring some life into it? So, yeah, absolutely.
Very
so if those two teams,
coach.
if those two teams can bring some life into the conference, I think that'd be a difference. Arizona, I believe, is also going there. So there's that.
I am glad. I'm glad you brought this up, bro. I have to get your thought.
Yeah.
What do you think? Deion's going to stay at Colorado long enough for this to be a long-term impact for the Big 12 as an acquisition?
I don't know, but this is something that I said from last year. I believe that Colorado has a legitimate opportunity. I may sound crazy here. I think they have a legit opportunity to play for the Big 12 championship this year. I do. Now, I had said that I thought that I saw them as the favorite with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, and Deion is building that team in his Deion way. All they have to do is they've got to keep Shadur Sanders, excuse me. They need to do a better job of keeping him upright because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, right? So if they're able to do that and they have skill on the outside, this can be a dangerous team. And they did a lot of work upgrading that offensive line in the offseason, getting guys in the trenches. So I believe that they can be dangerous. Now, when I predicted them possibly winning the Big 12, I totally forgot about Utah. So I gotta give Utah their due respect. I think they're now the best team in the Big 12. But to your question, I don't know what Deion does when Shadur's gone. I don't know. Because what if the Cowboys move up to draft Shadur Sanders and Jerry Jones says, "Come be my coach"? Like, can you say no to that?
I heard you say that before, and that's an interesting take. I don't think that's crazy. I mean, we know Jerry.
Right.
Jerry's going to do whatever brings attention to Dallas.
Jerry's going to Jerry. Right.
Yep. Amen. This is how I was thinking of. I agree with you. Colorado has a chance in the Big 12. I'm surprised they're not preseason top 25, given that they arguably have two first-round draft picks.
Yes, two of the best players in college football. Absolutely.
Team.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of shocked me, where I thought, I know last year was 4 games. It was a 4-win season. Yeah, you could say it was a disappointment. It was improvement, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
But I think undoubtedly they have 2 of the most talented players.
Correct.
Coming back in a conference that this is a big turnover for them, and they're losing 2 blue bloods. So the door's open.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I would also say this with the Big 12. I think Colorado has a chance, legitimately. I think there's about 5 teams in the Big 12 that have a chance. There's going to be parity in that conference. And it sounds crazy, but
Kansas State.
I do think Utah would probably be like the slight favorite.
Yeah.
You could throw Colorado in there. I think you could throw Kansas State in there. I think Oklahoma State has a legitimate.
Yep.
I've even heard a lot of noise coming from Central Florida. I heard UCF is going to have a squad this year.
They always have talent. Yeah, they have one of the best running back rooms in the country now. They have a lot of talent. Yeah.
It'll be a fun year, especially in that conference.
It's going to be a fantastic year. I'm so excited for college football to be back. I really am.
2 weeks. It can't get here. It can't get here soon enough, bro.
Right. Absolutely. It cannot get here soon enough. What else you got?
Well, The last thing I was thinking, and I know this is a bit of a biased one. I'm sure people don't want to hear us just talk about this thing. What do you honestly feel? Where do you see the schedule going? Where do you think we're legit could run the table at 12-0, 11-1, 10-2? Where do you think that one is?
Oh, man, it's going to be one of the three big ones, right? It's that A&M, USC, or Florida State. I do believe they beat Florida State. I don't think they smoke them. I think they beat them. That weather is going to play a role. And I believe last time they came to South Bend, they got handled pretty well.
Yeah, it was a smoke show last time in South Bend.
Yeah, it was. Was that?
I'm pretty sure that's when
Josh
Kyrie
Adams
was a freshman.
Okay.
And no, Kyron.
Yep. Yeah, he ran all over them. That's right.
And Chris Tyree were like the tandem.
Yep.
And they smoked them. I don't know if Travis was there. It might have been somebody else.
It was.
Travis.
It wasn't Travis yet.
Yeah, it was somebody else. And then we played them at Florida State. I want to say either the year before or the year right after. It was with Cohen, the quarterback transfer from Wisconsin. We opened up at Florida
Jack
State.
Cohen. That's right.
And
that's right.
we were dominating. And then Florida State came all the way back and put it into overtime. So that'll be interesting. I'll be honest with you, Bruce. I'd love to say 12-0.
I can't.
I love Mark.
I can't. I don't think they're good enough yet. There's going to be there's a slip somewhere in there.
I just can't do it. And I hate to say it. I hope this isn't the game. Mike Elko scares me, Bruce.
He's really good. And you're right, because look at the defense that he was able to play with Duke. And now he's at A&M. And so
look at the talent.
Yeah.
Look at that talent in the front seven. And this is where I'm scared, brother. That young offensive line at Kyle Stadium in that environment at night with some NFL defensive linemen.
That's right.
That's just a bad recipe. I surely hope they scheme some certain things to get Leonard on the move. Let him be an athlete. Don't let him stand back there and let those guys just come guns a-blazing.
Right.
I really hope they scheme this.
Well, that's where I think a lot of people are forgetting. Mike Elko knows everything that Riley Leonard wants to do. Right? that was his quarterback. So there's that. But on the flip side, Riley Leonard is also coaching his coaches at Notre Dame now on how Mike Elko wants to run defense. So there's that.
True.
So this is truly a chess match, Mike Elko and Mike Denbrock. It's really a chess match. Looking forward to it. And let's not forget, Notre Dame is I saw a meme on was Instagram earlier, and they were saying that, I think it was PFF, one of the PFF analysts was saying that Notre Dame goes into the season with a top 3 defense, and they wouldn't be surprised if they ended up end of the year as the #1 defense in the country.
I did see that.
Yeah.
I did see that.
Think about this. Now, we know you're going to – when was the last time – and we're going to move off of this before we – a bunch of people like, oh, my God, Notre Dame talk. But when was the last time you saw Notre Dame with a secondary that made you not be afraid of elite passing teams? For the first time in a long time, the Irish have that.
I was going to say not since Holt.
There you go.
Not since Lou.
Right.
I mean, we did not have back end. I mean, we've had our Kyle Hamilton. We've had a player here or there, but collectively, I agree. We've never had a unit where it's like, man, we can't really test certain guys. I really expect now, given his health, which I'm hearing everything's in the clear and things are good for Benji.
Yep.
So hopefully Ben is healthy, and I think he is a legit. I mean, look at some of the guys he's faced. I mean, he made Marvin Harrison look human.
Yes, he did.
Which is a very hard thing.
Very difficult to do.
It's a very hard thing to do. So, like, if you have that type of ability that can take away half the field, you have Xavier Watts.
That's right.
And I like our options on the other boundary with Christian Gray and Nicky. I think we got some guys that are like, man, and I'm hearing some good thing out of the young guys, the guys who are just stepping on.
I was about to say, the last thing I'm going to say on that is Benjamin Morrison says that it might sound crazy, but he thinks that, can't remember his name, this freshman corner on the other side.
Is it Leonard Moore?
Yes, that's who it is. Yes, he says he thinks this guy's going to be better than him. So that says a lot.
That's what I heard too, man. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, as a Notre Dame fan, we never get corners like this.
Right.
We never had really corners like this.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm gonna let it go here, man. We could do this all night, but we gotta move on. And I'm sure the non-Notre Dame people are like, okay, move it along. So,
yeah. Good to see you get off here.
Right.
I appreciate you, Bruce.
Yes,
I'm watching, brother.
Hey, thanks for the call, Steve. I appreciate you, man.
Bye-bye.
All right.